recently from your husband? There were a number of letters.
I did, yes. I got 2 letters dated January 3rd and January 7th by hand of John Thomas, who was an American Indian who went over and brought mail back to the families.
Could you tell us what was in the letter? What was his attitude and so forth?
Yes, well, it seemed to me that it was almost a normal letter. He's kept his sense of humor. He was a little guarded perhaps in what topics he touched on, but then I don't think any of the hostages know anything of what's going on outside. I was glad to note in his letter that he had some idea of the enormous support the American public was giving to these 50 men and women. And apart from that, though, I think they're given no knowledge at all.
Mrs. Kennedy. I think just 5 minutes is all we're going to need.
Yeah. But is it for news clip purposes?
Oh, yeah. It'll be a news clip.
Yes.
Right. Are you at the crisis center, all the time?
Pretty
or
much
was this
so.
this was since
Yes. Reed Clark.
He's been working in the crisis center. He limps. He's a tall guy.
Oh, yes, I know him. Yeah. Yes. Yes, he's part of the press.
Is he?
Isn't he?
No, I think I'm not sure he's handling press secretaries.
Okay, Paul, I'm rolling.
Mrs. Kennedy, it seems to be perceived that the American government may be shifting its emphasis somewhat on the Afghanistan situation rather than the release of the hostages. What would your reaction be to a statement like that?
Well, first of all, I don't think they are. Afghanistan, of course, has created a very big moment. It's a very serious move on the part of the Russians, and because it's contiguous to Iran, well, I don't know what to say exactly, but
all right, let's hold it.
yes.
Why don't we?
Yeah, I think we better start again.
Let's start again. Mrs. Kennedy, there seems to be a perception that perhaps the American government has shifted its main emphasis towards Afghanistan rather than the release of the hostages. What would your reaction be to that statement?
Well, I don't think that the United States government has shifted its attention from the release of the hostages for one moment. I think Afghanistan is something that's somewhat newer in the news. I mean, the hostages have been in the news now since November the 4th, and that's a very long time. Also, I think Afghanistan is a crisis which all of the world is involved with. Do you want to cut for that?
Yeah,
that's
let's
going to
cut
be
for
a
that,
problem
too.
because
Two-shot roll.
Mrs. Kennedy, there seems to be a perception that perhaps the American government has shifted its emphasis towards Afghanistan rather than the release of the hostages. What's your reaction to that?
well, I don't think they've taken their emphasis off the hostages. The national preoccupation in this country is with the hostages. But for the moment, yes, I think Afghanistan is the top of the news.
Well, then you feel that as much attention is still being paid to the hostages. It doesn't seem to be.
Well, I think that's a wrong perception.
You're in close touch with many of the families of the hostages.
Yes.
What's their feeling? I mean, would they agree with your assessment or what?
I think there are possibly some feelings about this, that indeed the hostages have fallen off the front pages of the newspapers. There isn't the constant flow of news coming out about them on the television. But on the other hand, the hostages have become a symbol in this country, and it's really, I think, because of them that this country has found a unity which it hasn't had in perhaps 40 years.
There are some people who believe that the lessening of direct news from Iran perhaps is a plus as far as the hostages are concerned. How do you feel about that?
I personally thought that was a good idea, yes.
You mean to have American journalists, or at least a heavy amount of journalists, thrown out of Iran, so to speak.
Yes, I think that having the journalists there and positioned at the compound was a natural focal point for the crowds to come to, and this was something that perhaps was blowing it out of proportion. I noticed that when the media left Tehran, that it quieted down rather noticeably around the U.S. compound in Tehran.
Do you believe it ironic that perhaps the Iranian government, in and sending these journalists out of the country, perhaps are helping the hostage situation?
Yes, I think that's possible.
What did you receive? Is there something the country should be doing, perhaps that isn't being done? I'm sure you support the
I think the country's
moves of the
done it.
government, but pardon?
I think the country's already done it. They are supporting, and I think they identify with the hostages. I couldn't tell you why, but it's as if everybody in the United States has put him or herself into the place of a hostage and felt the compassion, the sense of the whole thing. It's quite extraordinary and very good for the country, I think.
Hold it up, Joe.
Yes.
On the Afghanistan hostage sort of parallel, as I said, you're in touch very closely with many of the hostage families. Most of them, you say, agree with you, or is there some who really violently disagree that perhaps we're forgetting about the hostages, or what?
No, I don't think so. I think that, well, you have to realize this has been a very long period of strain, personal strain for people. And a great many of the families are very isolated in the sense that they're all over the United States. They're not in Washington. They're not even many of them on the East Coast. They are in small towns in Colorado and New Mexico, Washington State. And for them, I think it's a very lonely experience. Again, this differs from day to day. I think everybody has had their ups and downs, and I suppose that's normal. I don't know. I've had my ups and downs myself. I feel somewhat luckier than most in that I am here at the center. I am in Washington. I can be helpful, and I can get information as quickly, perhaps, or more so than other people. I do talk to the families a great deal. We have now a great many volunteers at the center also talking to families, and therefore I'm not as much in contact with each and every one as I was much earlier in this crisis. On the other hand, I think as the crisis has rolled along, there have been more and more activities, in a sense, or more and more ways in which families can somehow involve themselves in this, whether it's personally or through other groups or by mail or through their local television and radio broadcasting stations. They have been involving themselves into their own communities. And this, I think, is very good. I think when you realize that you're not alone, something like this, you gather strength. And this, again, goes back to what the country has done for every family, for every hostage. It's been a great saving thing. And I think the United States knows it, and I think the United States is proud of it.
I think we have it.
I think it is very important to understand the American position on this, and I think it goes farther than the position of the government. I think now it is a position that the country feels, and that is that what the Iranians did when they took diplomats hostage and demanded a ransom for them, if they thought that we were going to bend to blackmail, they were very wrong.